Apart from so many features that Spring provides, one of the main features of Spring is that it behaves like a factory of beans, which means it is going to manufacture objects of Java classes, which we call as beans, and then maintain them in a container and then provide to us whenever we want. To understand the same, let's take this example. Imagine you want to create a Java application. So let's call this as app. Typically, this could be a servlet, or it could be a service tier class, or it could be a simple public static void main program. And this has a dependency on, let's consider an interface called product DAO. So the product DAO interface has got some functions that my application wants to make use of. That being an interface, at the runtime, we need objects of some concrete class. Assume that the product DAO has two implementations. Let's say one of them is for mocking purposes. Let's call it as a dummy implementation. And let's assume that we have one real implementation of JDBC. So at the runtime, app depends on an object of dummy implementation or a JDBC implementation. And in the future, you may have another implementation which makes use of Hibernate or JPA. Typically, the way you would probably get an object of any of these implementation is in the app.java, you may say product DAO equals to new dummy product DAO or new JDBC product DAO. And this means that you have a runtime dependency on a dummy or JDBC, which you're trying to achieve by creating a new object in the app. And this leads to a concept of tight coupling. So the problem is that this kind of object requirement may be there in hundreds of places. If you are hard coding those new object creations in hundreds of places, and if you want to switch to a different implementation, this becomes a very tedious task. And that is the reason we would like to avoid this. And instead of we creating an object of this dummy or JDBC implementations, we want someone else to create the same thing. Now, general practice is that you create another class or an abstraction called as a factory that knows how to manufacture an object of any of these implementations. In our case, we're going to use Spring Framework for the same thing. So the Spring Framework maintains a container, and based on either an XML or annotation based configurations, Spring is going to create objects of these dummy or JDBC IMPLs and then maintains them. So our application now depends on the Spring rather than the actual implementations of this. So this is the concept of Spring as a factory of beans, where we configure Spring such that it has access to objects of dummy implementation, JDBC implementation, or if need be tomorrow some other implementation. All we are going to do is at the runtime, our app is going to talk to Spring and get an object of an appropriate implementation that's configured. In the next video, we will see using a Java program how to achieve the same thing.